Hi there, and good evening, afternoon, good morning, whatever time of the day it might be, wherever you are in the world. I'm your host, Gina Heuske, and I want to welcome you to this 30th edition of the OctoPrint on Air broadcast, this time with a little twist compared to what we are used to so far. So usually I do these live exclusively for those people who back me on my Patreon campaign for funding OctoPrint's development at the $5 level or up. But due to the current situation in the world, I decided at this time I would open this up to the general public. Whoever wants to join can join this time. So a hearty welcome to all of you who are tuning in for the very first time to this broadcast. I hope you'll enjoy it. I've also thought about maybe turning this, while this whole pandemic situation is going on, into some sort of in a slightly more compact form, into some sort of maybe weekly occurrence. I'm not sure yet if I actually want to go through with this, since it's a bit of a time commitment as well, and I'm also not sure if this is even of interest to you all. But I figured maybe it would be interesting to make some sort of public fireside chat once in a while now, to keep the community together, to get a bit of exchange going and all that. So we'll see how this goes today, and what the feedback and interest to it is, and then I'll see if I do that or not. So what we will do today is basically the same format that I always do in these things, and which most of you probably so far have only seen in the recordings that I publish after the fact. I will first tell you what I've been up to the past few weeks since the last installment, and what I will be doing next in my ongoing work on OctoPrint. And we'll have a quick look at the usage stats of the past month. That are getting reported by the anonymous usage tracking plugin that's built into OctoPrint. And then we'll have a rather large Q&A section where I'll answer some questions that you have submitted beforehand, and where I'll also keep an eye on the live chat, where you can also submit questions while this is going on. So for those of you watching this live, which right now obviously all of you are, there's a live chat to your right on the desktop, or below on mobile, and there I'll also keep an eye on, and you can also ask questions there for the Q&A segment later. So let's dive straight in. What I've been up to. So I guess, like all of us, I've been monitoring the whole Corona situation very closely, and I'm feeling a bit like I'm an extra in Contagion, that movie that about a pandemic outbreak of last time I was still very excited to be attending MRF for the very first time, and going to the US for that and all that, and finally making it off this continent for the first time. And then things escalated, and so back on March 7th, after closely monitoring the infection rates and all that, I already decided to cancel my trip with a heavy heart, I have to say. And 2 weeks or so later, MRF was officially postponed anyhow. Right now, all other events that I planned well into September have been canceled now, so yay. What I'm doing is I'm just staying at home, working as usual. And I have to say, for me personally, this whole situation right now is very surreal, to say the least, because I've been working from home for the past 6 years. And during this time, my day-to-day life is basically just going to my home office and not having that much human contact at all, maybe with the mailman or a pizza delivery guy or so, and then occasionally going out, meeting friends, going to the bouldering gym once per week, for example, stuff like that. And right now, so the going out stuff, that's canceled now, but everything else still feels pretty much the same. But I'm getting this whole disturbing news on social media and everywhere, and that's a bit weird. So it's odd. It's just the whole situation is just kind of anxiety inducing and not very nice, but of course to all of us. And I just hope that all of us will just get through it unscathed. And well, yeah. Um, Anyhow, considering that I've been doing this kind of stuff for the past 6 years now, if you need any tips on how to stay sane when working from home for lengthy periods of time, I might be a bit of a small expert in that regard, maybe. So recently, I also pushed out a lengthy Twitter thread on this topic, and I figured I would just repeat some points from that here in case it helps anyone watching this. So, what helped me the past 6 years? A ton in yeah, staying sane, getting some kind of routine, and not feeling very weird and isolated and yeah, odd all the time was so first of all to establish yeah, regular working hours and sticking to them, so to really establish a routine and also to establish boundaries for myself between work and life. And that also applies for physical boundaries. So this is my office and I work here. And when my day is over, then I go usually into my living room. And I rarely am inside this room anymore when I don't work. And I definitely do not work anywhere but this room. And this is really helping to get my brain in this sort of mood like, okay, you're now in productivity and working mode. And yeah, that is something that really, really helps a lot. And it also allows you to just go away on in the end of the day and just drop the hammer and really move physically elsewhere. And that way get this separation in your head as well. And if you do not have a dedicated office, this is fine, but you need some, in my opinion or in my experience, you need some form of dedicated space. If it's just a dedicated corner on your couch table or something, that's okay, where you physically move and then move away from there when you no longer work. But you really should look if you can find somewhere way to get this physical separation as well. And what also is what's also something that I yeah, very much insist on whenever someone asks me how to approach all this is dress for work. Wear pants. Trust me on this. It might feel very liberating at first to not have to wear pants at work, but this is another thing that really puts your brain into this mindset. I dress like I would for working at an office every day. I wear jeans. I wear some nurtured, but I wear stuff with which I can also just go outside and meet people and not get weird looks. And this really helps also to get my brain into this sort of, okay, now is work time, not play time kind of mindset. Then of course stay in touch with people via electronic means, like for example something like a live stream or something like this. But no, I actually mean stuff like if you have a company Slack, or if you have people who work on the same stuff or similar stuff as you, then get them in some kind of group chat, and just to get this sort of water cooler talk going, and not give you the feeling that you're completely lonely and isolated and alone and no one is there to bounce ideas off and such. So you just need this feeling basically to have people there. And that already does a whole lot to your head. That really helps with dealing with this kind of stuff. And most importantly, really make the best of it. You are in your home office. You're not disturbing any colleagues or anything. Just turn up your music and enjoy it. And during your lunch break, play some video games or stuff like that. Work out while you're thinking about things that you have to, just sit and stare at for a lengthy period of time anyhow. So, and if you're churning over some kind of problem, for example, so when I'm trying to think of some solution to some programming challenge or some architectural challenge or something like that, what I do is I do household chores. So I usually just like take care of the dishwasher or fold laundry, all that, and so I give my brain some space to breathe, so to speak, while it's churning over these things, and in the meantime also do some useful stuff. Yeah, and these are the things that I really can recommend. And in general, of course, right now, wash your hands. Don't stay glued to the news feeds, because those only give you really, really bad feelings. And try to make the best of all of this, because there's not much choice other than staying put and hoping for the best right now. And so I hope, that if we just do this, and we'll get over it, and hopefully unscathed. And just to quickly cover a question from the live chat, do you have any hobbies? I have a ton of hobbies. I honestly cannot understand at all the many people who are currently on Twitter and such, posting stuff like, I'm bored because I'm in the home office, or I cannot go to work right now and I'm bored. I don't understand that. I have a ton of stuff that I could be doing if I wasn't busy as right now. So yeah. Right. What else what else have I been up to these past weeks? So on March 4th, so just when everything was Corona-wise amping up, so really extremely, I released OctoPrint 1.4.0. And so immediately after release, I learned that there are apparently some issues with some touch UI setups out there, which was due to a new security feature that I introduced in OctoPrint 1.4.0 that was configurable, and which, if by default, prevented OctoPrint from being embeddable into frames in order to prevent the clickjacking attack. And that sadly conflicted with the way that the touch UI screen bootstrap utility thingy, if you run it on a local touchscreen directly on your Pi, worked, and that led to OctoPrint no longer displaying on that. And it was a bit of a weird issue at first, because it just had me scratching my head. It had Billy Blaze, the developer, scratch his head, and then finally we figured it out. And I made this feature configurable, so after it was figured out that this was the problem, I could just release this info how to turn it off, and it's now an FAQ entry. So if you're affected by that, then just look into the FAQ. There's an entry about it there, and it's also linked in the corresponding Touch UI plugin ticket. And then it was a really, really easy fix. And another issue that I learned about was, or rather that it turned out to be more widespread than I thought it was. There is, so the port auto detection on OctoPrint 1.4.0 was no longer working for a lot of people all of a sudden. And that was apparently due to the fact that OctoPrint 1.4.0 introduced an additional port pattern. So OctoPrint has a set of patterns for port names configured by default, which it considers serial ports that can be printers, and which it searches for to populate this port list that you get for selection, and which it also uses for port auto detection, of course. And I added, or rather a pull request that I got, added a dev TTYS asterisk there, which can also be a serial port on some machines. The problem is that apparently some people out there with their existing setups have, I'm not sure if it's the Pi camera or if it's some touch screen interfaces on displays that are attached, but for some people there exist dev TTYS devices that OctoPrint then finds with 1.4.0 all of a sudden. And the thing is, port auto detection in OctoPrint so far, so the actual port auto detection so far relies on having OctoPrint try to enter the serial port into programming mode. That's something that I inherited from Cura back in late 2012 when I forked Cura in order to inherit the whole communication layer. And this is one tiny bit that has survived since then. And the problem with this approach is that it really never worked with all printers, because some printers you simply cannot set in programming mode, or you need to shorten additional pins or something like that, and those then will not be identified by this method. And so due to this problem, back in probably 2016 or so, I changed things in OctoPrint. So if it only found one single serial port, so one candidate anyhow, it would just use that and try try baud rate detection with that, or just use the configured baud rate and see if it was a printer by running through the handshake and seeing if it got back something that looked like a printer, and if so, yay, and if not, okay. So if there's only one port found. So, and here's where the problem happens, because suddenly on some machines with 140 there was this additional port found. So it entered this more sophisticated loop where it tries to enter programming mode on all of the ports, and that failed on the printer because it would never have worked before on the printer. But that then led to auto detection failing. Okay, and well, the easy solution to this, of course, the immediate easy solution available to everyone without any patches or anything, is just do not set your port to auto, but instead select the correct port from the dropdown, which usually should be easy to do, and also save that configuration, and then you should never have to do it again. As long as your port stays available, I should add, because sometimes they vanish when you power down the printer, in which case you might want to install the port lister plugin, because that will also react to ports popping up and going away again, and refresh the list accordingly. Or you just click the little refresh icon in the upper right of the connection panel. An alternative solution is to remove the detected dev.ttys ports again from the list. And I wrote a plugin for that last week that does exactly that. So you can now, if you have 140, install that plugin, and then everything should just work as it did before, as long as you only have one serial port detected then, if you remove these again. The plugin is registered on the official plugin repository, and you can just one-click install that, and everything should be fine then. The proper solution to all this mess is, of course, to get rid of this broken, to begin with, detection probing method of trying to set that thing into programming mode, because it fails in 50% of the time or something like that anyhow, or even more these days. I honestly don't know the percentage here, and then replace that instead by something that I already do for the baud rate, for the baud rate detection, which is basically just iterating over the list of available options and then trying to talk to the printer and seeing if I get something usable back from it, and if so, yay, and if not, try the next combination. The challenge here, and this is why I'm not 100% sure yet if I get this into 141, sorry, is that, I mean, consider this. You have like maybe 3 possible ports, and you have the usual list of, I think it's something like 8 possible baud rates. So I have 24 combinations to check. And if you're really, really unlucky, the working one is the 24th. So you do not want to have the user wait for minutes there. So what I have to do is try to figure out the most probable combination, and also maybe not try all 8 baud rates, but really only the 2 most common ones, which are 150,200 and 250,000 baud, plus maybe whatever you might have configured as additional baud rates. And try to also maybe prefer things like that are more commonly printers, like dev.tty USB 0, dev.tty ACM 0. Those are really the most common offenders. And so if I find these, I would probably try to prioritize them over something like dev.tty S0 or something like this. So that is the current idea, but yeah, and then run through the whole usual handshake and see if I get something that looks like a printer response back. Yeah, and I really wish I didn't have to do all this, but there was some easy way to identify a printer. But yeah, the only way really is trying to talk to it. And for that, I first need a port and a valid baud rate. And then I can try to talk to it. And yeah, that's a bit annoying. Okay. What else did happen during this release phase? So there was a pretty usual number of update issues due to what appears to be corrupted file systems or completely outdated environments. And let me just jump on a soapbox quickly here. Please, people, do not just pull the power from your Pis. I cannot count the number of instances anymore where I try to support someone with an update problem or with an install problem or with a stability problem on their system, and it turned out to be due to a corrupted file system because they just, every time they were done with their print job, they just pulled the power from the Pi without shutting it down properly first. Linux file systems really do not like that. Don't do that. Please shut it down first over the system menu. There is one down there in there that if you really want to power down your Pi, then please shut it down first. By the way, you do not have to power it down. Actually, I just keep mine running. I have no idea what the uptime is on that thing, but it's way less of a hassle than constantly having to power it up and down again to just keep it running. It's a server. It doesn't eat much power. It doesn't have a display attached. It's just really doing not much of anything while it's not running, but it's always available that way. And this is not Corona. This is me talking too much and having a dry throat. Already better. Okay. Other than that, the whole 1.4.0 rollout appears to have been a pretty smooth sailing. I just knocked on wood. Which is something that I'm really thrilled about, I have to say, because I was very, very anxious about rolling out this update. Like I literally I literally sat here like trying to how do you say, trying to psych me up to click on the bloody button to release the thing. I've been working on it, I think, since 2016 now, and and it was in the RC phase over 3 months. And so there were a ton of larger changes. The whole granular permission system that replaced the old one and touched every part of the system. And of course, the Python 3 compatibility migration that also touched every part of the system. So considering how many changes went in there and that basically everything was touched at one point or another and modified at one point or another, I'm really, really pleasantly surprised how smooth that has been. And I'm sure there will still be some bugs here and there that we'll need to iron out in the coming maintenance releases. But really, so far, I'm cautiously calling this a successful rollout and am quite proud of this. What else did I do? I started fixing some minor things here and there for 1.4.1 already. Caught up on some plugin reviews and similar things that had accumulated during this whole release phase with 1.4.0 and the whole RC candidates were the release candidates. So the release candidates, I didn't have time to really take care of all that. And one issue that I fixed was especially fun, I have to say, because I got these reports that the print progress in the G-code viewer was lagging behind. And lagging more and more behind the further you went on into the print. And that is very unusual because usually, due to the nature of firmware buffering on all that, the G-code viewer is slightly ahead of the actual print. And at first I figured it was just one isolated case and thought, okay, no, probably not really that big of a problem. And then more and more people reported this issue, and I tried to reproduce it and I couldn't, and I was really, really stumped on this. And in the end, after a lot of analyzing and debugging and barking up the wrong tree here and there, it turned out to be an issue in OctoPrint itself, which did not correctly calculate the print progress, so how the percentage basically, in case of files, in case of G-code files that had carriage return line feed line endings. So 2 characters instead of just line feed. So \r\n instead of just \n. And yeah, I also put out a lengthy Twitter thread for the general entertainment of all of you on this, but long story short, it took me 14 days to figure this out and 12 characters to fix it. And I also put out a plugin for that problem, which I did not put on the repository, but which you can find on github.com/octoprint. And John just asked in the live chat, it was fun sorting it out, wasn't it? It was a really huge relief to finally understand this. Like, I honestly sat here and exhaled a bunch of curse words when I finally understood the issue. Yeah, well, so you can find this plugin on the OctoPrint GitHub. So just go to github.com/octoprint, and then there is, if you scroll down the list, there's something that's called OctoPrint Fix CRLF Progress Reporting, and yeah, you can just install that, and then stuff will work. The thing is, I did not put this on a plugin repository because I already fixed it for 141. Not that many people were affected because it's only affecting people whose slicer for some reason injects CRLF instead of just LF into the G-code files, and I could not reproduce this with either Prusa slicer or the current Cura version. So I don't know who of you is affected, but those of you who are affected, use that until 141 comes out. And what I've been also doing is I've been doing some refactoring here and there in OctoPrint's source that I've been meaning to do for ages. For example, I just extracted the printer safety warning because having that coupled to the release cycle of OctoPrint itself, which is a bit on the lengthy side due to all the testing that has to go into it and all the lengthy RC period that has to go into it and all that, and also the mission criticality of it, so to speak. Having that stuck to that release cycle was severely hindering whenever some new printer issue, some firmware with disabled thermal runaway protection or something like that was discovered. So it's now its own project with its own release cycle, but with OctoPrint. So OctoPrint has a dependency on that. So if you install the next OctoPrint version, it will pull that in as well. And it will also be able to update itself on this new release cycle, so you get a pop-up notification for that thing. And it will also still be considered a bundled plugin because it is basically a bundled plugin. It's just being pulled in from a different source than stock OctoPrint. Now that I can keep it updated more frequently, I can better react to situations like, as I said, new printers with disabled thermal runaway protection, or the thing that I just had where, there's this new firmware making its rounds on cheap printers, mostly from China, which only identifies itself as CBD make it. Note the funny grammar in there, and or ZWLF make it, and which is broken in 3 exciting ways that make printing from OctoPrint to it completely impossible. And I pushed out a plugin that fixes these issues. And now I can also have future versions of the printer safety plugin, which I've renamed to the firmware check. Just detect these kinds of things and help users by telling them in a pop-up, hey, by the way, your firmware is broken in exciting ways. Please see this link for information on how to get it to work regardless. Or, hey, by the way, your printer might burn your house down. Please see this link in order for information to make it safe. That is the idea behind that. And so far it's working great. And I also took the opportunity to experiment a bit with GitHub Actions for a full build pipeline in order to push this stuff out on PyPI and where else. And that's really nice because I hope to be able, and this brings me to what are the next steps. I hope to be able to also use that in OctoPrint in the future in order to, automate some parts of the release cycle that so far I had to do manually. And that will not only save time here and there, but it will also prevent me from doing mistakes here and there. And that's really nice. And what else will I be doing? In general, I want to do some more long-needed housekeeping. So for example, ever since I launched the anonymous usage tracking plugin, I've been telling you that I want to put it, so make the data available publicly. I really need to look into that and I hope I'll be able to do that soon. And what I also have been getting a lot of requests for stuff like comments and rating and such for the plugin repository to better identify plugins that have been abandoned and things like that. So this is just a brainstorming phase right now on how best to do that without having to pay even more money for servers to run any kind of backends for this. But this is stuff that I really want to look into now because it's been put off for far too long. And of course, naturally also diving back into development. So on one hand, there's what is now the Devil branch, which is currently named 150 dev, but I might still turn it into a 2.0.0 dev because I'm also at a point where I need to do some tech research soon in order to finally do something about the whole UI situation. It's become dated. It still runs on Bootstrap 2, and which has been out of support for years, and it's frankly not flexible enough to do some things that a lot of people would like it to do, like fully responsive and all that, and also being able to more fine tune the presentation and where which bits of it go and all that. So this is something that I want to look into. And since it just got mentioned on the chat, I run Home Assistant myself, and this the approach that they are doing, the Lovelace UI, is actually something that I want to take a closer look at for that, because that looks very promising. And so that might be the direction this all takes. And of course, what I also need to do is get back to refactoring the com layer. I originally wanted to push it into 1.4.0, but everything else going into 1.4.0 just made that too risky, and also the time was running out with all the Python 2 end of life situation. Because I really wanted to have a Python 3 capable version of OctoPrint out ASAP, and so it's back on the to-do list now. I'm still hoping that I can put it out in a maintenance release for 1.4, so some kind of 1.4.3, 4. I don't know. The thing is, it depends a bit on whether I can keep it 100% backwards compatible. If I can't, then I'll have to move it into 2.0 or 1.5.0 for limited degrees of backwards compatibility. If I can, then I'll try to push it with a maintenance release. And that is the idea. And so now I'm just quickly going over the live chat because it's been way more busy than usual, and I've kind of lost track here. So the question was if OctoPrint uses the UUID to identify the printer. No, it doesn't. The thing is that the only thing that I can see from Python is whatever properties are attached to the serial port. And as far as I know, there's nothing on there that would help me in any way. So sometimes on some printers, you actually have a proper device name there, but most just are FTDI USB serial chip or CH430 USB serial chip, and that is not really helpful. That could be an Arduino clone, or that could be a printer, or it could be a printer that runs on an Arduino clone. So that's just the only way really to figure out anything here is to connect to the thing, try to talk the G-code protocol with it, and I'm using these here because G-code is a file format. I'm not going to go on this soapbox now, and see if I get something back that looks like a valid response. And so this is the approach here. Jean-Francois says there are Pi heads that allow you to add a power on-off button to make it easier to shut down. Yep, and that is something that, well, if you want to have that, that's definitely an option to make it easier. In general, I think just leave the thing running. Vincent asks, we going for a quicker release cycle from now on then? Yeah, sure. Give me a team of maybe 5 or 6 more people and we can talk about that. But without that and just me doing most of the heavy lifting, sorry, but no, I still need to sleep from time to time. And this is the fastest that I can go. And yeah, stuff like the stuff like the new granular permission system and stuff like that, that just needs a ton of time of testing, of working the kinks out and such. And I cannot fully 100% concentrate on doing development like that. Like half of my time is just doing maintenance, and there's a huge amount of time also for support. So this is as fast as it gets. Sorry. What else? Arno asks. There's more like for the Q&A later, but still, how do I create a true read-only user? Selecting read-only group during creation seems to add the ordinary user access as well, which can't be removed. I saw the thread on the forum about that, and I want to get back to that, but I have to do some research for that first, and I didn't manage to get around to it today because I had to prepare this thing. But I have it in my mind, and I'll try to get back to you on the thread, or back on. I'm not sure if it was you who created the thread, but I'll try to get back on this in the thread. Does OctoPrint already support external authentication via HTTP header? Yep, it does. There is a setting in config YAML, and it's also documented in the docs. And if you set that to true, then it will accept user information from the HTTP headers, and you can use that. And no, Jim, you do not have to immediately learn a new framework. I first have to decide on one. That's the tricky part. Okay, yeah. Then let's go over to the next point, which is a quick look at the stats, and I'll switch you over there to my other screen. So I also got a question in the backlog that really nicely matches the quick look at the stats, which is, let's have a look at any usage patterns that have probably changed due to the pandemic, e.g. work printers may be switched off now that more people work from home, and private instances may get more usage. I was expecting to print a lot more suddenly, but have actually not printed anything since self-isolating, too busy with family, schoolwork, hygiene, etc. And I'm starting with this stats point because this is actually something that I've been monitoring closely myself, and it was quite interesting to monitor. So let me quickly switch over to this view, and this has the print events per day and the hours printed, and we're not going to look at these now, but rather at this down here. And this is a heat map showing the print starts per hour per day. So 24 hours and I think 30 days. And this is when I got print finish events, also per hour per day. Total print durations and average print durations at which hour. And so what really surprised me at first was that for the first weeks of March, there was not really happening that much. I mean, there was a bit of darkening going on here, which meant more prints happening here while people were starting to self-isolate. But at least here in Germany, where we were asked to try to self-isolate as much as possible, as far as back as here, I think. So something like here. That's where it started. This is where the schools were closed. Here. And so I expected this to be way redder than it actually is. But then this week, it really darkened. And you can also see that the total print durations, that there wasn't really that much change. And you can also see it here. So the total print duration increased, of course, because more prints were happening, but the mean duration per day, so how long the average print job took, basically did not change that much. So whatever you all are printing does take almost the same time as whatever else you are always printing. Oh wait, could you even see that? I'm scrolling up here a bit. right, yeah. So you have the mean duration per day and total duration per day. And this has a slight uptick, and this is just pretty much constant. Right. So my guess is that this is around the time that that Prusa released their face shield files, and maybe so people are now. So this is just increase from printing face shields. I don't know. Also here the Sunday was intense. Let's see how that will look this Sunday. I'll try to give an update via Twitter. So that was that. And then let's look a bit closer into other parts of the stats. So this is the usual dashboard, which shouldn't actually self-update anymore. I disabled that, but okay. So past 7 days only, because if I set this to anything above 7 days, the amount of queries pretty much brings the server to a grinding halt. So I'm not going to do that now. But yeah, you see how many how many instances of 1.4.0 and 1.3.12 and so on were seen in the last 24 hours. How many instances were seen totally over the course of the last 7 days? So around 57,000 unique instances, which collectively printed something over 91 years in some summed up duration over the past 7 days. They are here, 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 and here, and here, and everywhere, and there's still no blip in Antarctica. I want a blip in Antarctica. And also none in Madagascar, and no, I'm not going to make Plague Inc. jokes now. Because I just saw the question bunch of times, I think, in the live chat. Here is the Python version that gets reported on startup. And I actually said that over the last 60 days. So currently we have, of those who have enabled the tracking, I always have to add that because it's opt-in. If you do not actively opt into tracking, then you will not be counted on this whole thing because privacy and all that. And I'm taking that very seriously. So we have, like, over the past 60 days, I saw 80,200 startups or unique instances with a startup event, I should say, running Python 2, and 428 running Python 3. So not much Python 3 happening yet. But yeah. That is that. And I wanted to say something about this. Oh, right, yeah. So right now the Python version gets only reported during startup. So if you do not start your instance over the course of the past 60 days, then I will not see that here. But I've changed that in 1.4.0 so that the environment information will also now feature in the daily Pong or in the 12-hourly Pong event, which I send out, which also contains the list of plugins and all that, so that I get a more correct picture of what is currently running at a given point in time. We also see that most people over the past 7 days have printed with 1.4.0, and also that the printed hours per version. No, we don't actually see that here because, yeah, I was just going to say that they have increased over the past week, but this is only 1 week, so we cannot really see that here. Regardless, I was just talking about plugins. And I'm actually going to quickly switch just to that so that I do not block the view. So with OctoPrint 1.3.12 onwards, OctoPrint is also reporting what plugins and what versions you have installed if you have not disabled that or and opted into the tracking. And so here is the top 20 of the plugins out there. Octolabs is still the winner. And you can also see the install count here. And here's also the breakdown by version. So yeah, that can also be helpful, I was told by the plugin authors. As I said, yes, I want to make this public. No, I haven't yet. I'm sorry. I'm doing my best. Okay. Then this might also be a bit interesting, I figured. This makes the update phase quite interesting to see because this tracks the life cycle of OctoPrint instances. So startup, shutdown, and update events. and the average uptime of the instances in question. And the more updates you have, the less the average update is. So that matches things nicely. And you can also see this huge spike of updates here, right when OctoPrint 1.4.0 was released. And another one here on the weekend after, I think. Is this a weekend? Roughly. And a lot of people are apparently really shutting down the system each day. Or rather, that is the problem, not really shutting it down, I fear. And this is something that I talked about earlier, where people are just pulling power. I'm not 100% sure if this is really what we are seeing here, but so OctoPrint also emits an event when it shuts down. So when it gets shut down properly, which also happens when you shut down the Pi properly, then it pushes a shutdown event. This is the yellow line here. And when it starts, it also emits an event. And this is the green line here. And as you can see, there are way more green lines than yellow lines. And that means that there are way more startup events than shutdown events. And that always worries me a bit. And look, you can also see that here. So number of instances where the shutdown events, and yeah, it's a bit odd. Okay. And I also wanted to show you this. So careful, this is a logarithmic. That was the word. Is a logarithmic scale, and this shows the rollout of the final RC, and then the rollout of the stable version. And yeah, I found that quite neat. Also the printed hours. So these tiny little bits up here are the printed hours of the RCs, and then everyone started updating to 1.4.0 when this happened. So this is always kind of fun. And yeah, you can also see a bit like the distribution of version numbers here and all that, but not going to go into that much now. Now a quick look at the live chat again. So we currently do not have an OctoPi version out there that has Python, that ships with Python 3, or rather with an OctoPrint running under Python 3, and I'm going to go on that with the next Q&A question, actually, the prepare one, and also how to switch if you want to switch. Then there was the question if outside of time there's anything else holding me back from making the stats accessible, and yes, there is. I consider these stats very sensitive. I mean, they are anonymized and all that, but I still do not want to give the general public access to this kind of data, because I do not want even unique instance identifiers to be available to the general public, just in case they show up in logs or anything like that. And what I want to do is extract the raw, basically the data that is underlying under these graphs, and provide that, so that you can see the result of working on that data, but not actually access the data. Because yeah, I really do not. I think it would be wrong to give everyone access to raw data here, and that I would need to do that if I made this Grafana instance public, for example, because Grafana queries the stuff and the data is in there. You can really see a lot of sensitive stuff that you could query then via this interface. And I really do not want to open this can of worms. And I also am not a lawyer, and I also cannot hire one just to figure out if this would even be legal under the GDPR. And so I'm just not going to do that from that perspective either, and just push the data, pre-process it, and then do it that way. Johan, do not pull the power from your OctoPi, please, because then you cause me more work when it doesn't work anymore, and you come in the forum and demand support from me. So, what's my ETA plans for an updated COM layer? It's done when it's done, really. I've given ETA and plans out for way too long that I then couldn't hold because something else came up, and I just had to play firefighter woman again somewhere, and fix stuff. And it's done when it's done. It was in a really printing state when I had to stop working on it half a year ago, when I entered into the 1.4.0 release cycle fully, like finalizing that thing and then pushing out 3 months of release candidates and monitoring their testing and analyzing anything that happened with them and stuff. And then, yeah, so it hasn't, I still have to merge changes from back that I did over this half year back onto that branch, and then I can get back onto it. Yep. Yep. Okay, so that was the current questions, and now we're going to switch back to this thing. Okay. So, can we have a status for Python 3 from a user perspective? OctoPrint is ready, but can I upgrade? What is about the plugins I installed, and or what is the overall plugin status? So, this question actually prompted me to add a tiny feature to the plugin repository page. So if you go on plugins.octoprint.org, you will now see a tiny little, under the stats thing on the right, in the right sidebar, you will now see a tiny little counter and a percentage that tells you how many of the plugins in the repository are currently flagged as being Python 3 compatible. And this afternoon, this was 194 total registered plugins in the repository, of which 46 reported Python 3 readiness, so 23%. And I have to admit that of those 77% which are not yet Python ready, there are also some of mine in there, because I have simply not had found yet the time to migrate them. If you want to help is always welcome. So as you can see, a ton of the plugins that are currently in the repository aren't yet installable under Python 3. And side note here, that they are not flagged for compatibility doesn't necessarily mean that they are completely incompatible and there will be a ton of work to get them to work or anything. It could be as easy as just setting the flag. But OctoPrint will refuse to load any plugins that aren't actively flagged as compatible. And the plugin manager and the plugin repository browser in the plugin manager will also not show them as compatible and installable, simply because I could not anticipate the ways of possible breakage that would occur with third-party plugins only coded for Python 2, loaded under Python 3. And since I did not want to risk people's instances breaking in new exciting ways, I figured, okay, I'll just have err on the side of caution and force plugin authors to actually flag their plugins for compatibility. Tricky word. But as I said, for a lot of plugins, it probably suffices to just simply set the flags in question. If you do rely on a number of plugins for your daily printing needs, I currently would not advise you to update or to migrate your OctoPrint installation to Python 3. Unless, of course, if you want to help migrating these plugins, which I'm pretty sure a lot of plugin authors would be very grateful for. I'm also expecting some of the plugins that are currently on the repository to turn out to be unmaintained or abandoned. And again, some of mine are in that state as well. And I think I pushed out an adoption note for the push builder plugin maybe like 1.5 or 2 years almost ago, and so far no one has adopted it. So honestly, I'm not using it myself anymore, and if no one adopts it, it will never made to work with Python 3, and that's the way things are. It simply does not make sense to invest time in something that no one uses. But what I hope is that long-term the community will step up and keep those things alive that are actually being used and are useful. So it is a bit of a disruptive situation that we find ourselves in here, but yeah, can't help it. Now I just quickly have to check something. We'll come back to some more things about how to migrate to Python 3 later. I could have reordered these Q&A questions. You know what? I'll just... I even had these numbers here. Sorry. I'm simply jumping a bit ahead now, because Scott also asked, my question for you is whether I need to update OctoPi as part of the Python 3 migration. I'm running the latest stable build of OctoPrint 1.4.0, but haven't touched the original OctoPi installation since I put it on my Raspberry Pi last summer. I think I still have 0.16.0 running. What is the best way to keep OctoPi up to date? So, I'm going to first answer the OctoPi question and then go back to the Python 3 one. On OctoPi, there are three things that you need to, that need to be kept up to date. One is OctoPrint plus any of the installed plugins. The other is OctoPrint's virtual environment in which it runs, so its own Python environment, which uses parts of the global Python environment from the whole image, and then your image underneath. So with the general Python version that is available, and also stuff like the Wi-Fi drivers and all that. OctoPrint and plugins can update itself through OctoPrint's built-in software update mechanism. So far, so good. That can also update the stuff that is installed inside the virtual environment to a certain degree. But when it comes to stuff like the Python version or the or things like system packages, Wi-Fi drivers, display drivers, whatever, new kernels in order to run on new Raspberry Pi hardware, stuff like that, then it comes down to two options. If you want to keep that updated and also update the Python version and all that, and really have the latest and greatest, an apt-get upgrade and manual rebuild of the virtual environment so that Python also gets updated. And if you rebuild the virtual environment, that means you also need to reinstall all the plugins that were installed into it. And that means that you basically have to do a backup of OctoPrint, then do all this, then restore OctoPrint inside the environment. The other alternative is you do the backup of OctoPrint, then you reflash a fresh image on your SD card, and then you restore everything. And this is probably faster and less error prone. So generally, the advice is if you need to update OctoPi, go with the backup route, refresh, restore. It simply breaks less. I've had really weird issues reported on the forum from people who just ran an apt-get upgrade. And the thing is, neither guy who maintains the OctoPi image nor me can control what happens if you run an apt-get upgrade, because OctoPi is basically just a Raspbian image with some bits on top. And apt-get upgrade is part of the regular Raspbian image. And if something is pulled in that way that breaks the things that are important for the bits on top, so OctoPrint, MJPEG streamer, stuff like that, then everything is now toast and you have to back up, reflash, restore anyhow. So just back up, reflash, restore, and everything is fine. Now about Python 3. For now as a user, and I'm strictly talking about a user right now. So someone who's just using that stuff, not developing anything for OctoPrint, not a plugin dev, nothing like that. They just want to run their printer with OctoPrint and install plugins and all that, and do not touch any code in the process. For now, I would say just don't do anything right now, because we just saw we only have 23% of all plugins that are registered on a repository already supporting Python 3. So most of the plugin repository is currently not available if you update to Python 3. Your stuff will just continue to work fine on Python 2. End of life for Python 2 doesn't mean that everything just stops working. It means you don't necessarily get security updates anymore, which you don't get anyhow unless you do all this aforementioned manual backup of the underlying system image. By the way, you should at least apply security patches. Yeah, security patches regularly. It will just continue to work fine. And right now we are at a state where it's important that the plugin maintainers, so the people who actually write the plugins that are on the repository, get them migrated, get them compatible to Python 3. So I put out a Python 3 compatible OctoPrint version that they can develop against and migrate, and then flag stuff as compatible to both. And then slowly this 23% will hopefully turn into a larger number. Once it is a bit more widespread, and I haven't yet decided on a specific now I'm lacking the word, cutoff percentage or something like that with Guy. But once this has reached a bit of saturation, then we'll put out an OctoPi image that comes with an OctoPi RC, I should say, that comes with a Python 3 image, with a Python 3 virtual environment. And then we can take it from there and see how adoption rate looks. And yeah, this is about the plan. This is the plan right now. And backup and restore will work for that as well. And if you're a plugin author and you want to know how to migrate your existing development environment to something that runs Python 2 and 3 in parallel, or how to migrate your existing OctoPi instance to Python 3, or rather the virtual environment for OctoPrint on your existing OctoPi instance to Python 3, there is a migration guide for plugin developers inside the developing plugin section on the documentation. And that explains all that. This also contains some common pitfalls during migration that I worked out with the community of plugin developers in a thread on the forum. So stuff, and also stuff that I fell or stumbled over myself during migration, and that we changed in OctoPrint, a bit of a checklist, some links that might help you as a plugin author to get through this and migrate it and all that. And this also contains a note, if you're running OctoPi, on what you have to do for that. If you want to do that. And as I said, I would not recommend it necessarily if you still rely on a ton of plugins for your daily workflow, but if not, well, feel free. The information is there. And back to this. Okay. So, and now we are going back to the question we skipped. Or rather, first let me quickly take a look. Wim asks how you can see in the plugin repo if a plugin is compatible. Let me just quickly show you that if I manage to type the URL correctly. For example, if you look at this one, you see compatibility information, Python, larger or equal to 2.7, less than 4. Less than 4 means 3 is included, means this is Python 3 compatible. Whereas, for example, I'm not sure if the firmware update, firmware update hasn't yet been updated, or at least hasn't yet set the flag in the plugin repository as well. I don't know about the source, to be honest. More than 2.7, less than 3. So this one is not yet Python 3 compatible because less than 3. That is all basically that you need to know for that. So what else do we have? A lot of discussion about physical buttons. There was a question by Goland. I'm not even. I know you, of course. I have no idea right now how to properly pronounce your nickname. Anyhow, do you expect Python 3 to improve performance over Python 2? From my own observation so far, yes, it actually seems to run faster. What it definitely will do once I can go Python 3 only is use some really nifty new language features, which I'm looking forward to, which will improve the speed of development significantly. Okay. That was the current questions, I hope, from the... Oh no, Jim asks, is it possible to get the initial startup wizard after flashing to have an option to restore directly? That was actually a question I also recently got on Discord, I think. And that's a good idea. Yeah, I want to add that I just have to look how best to approach it. Because right now the first step is setting up a user. And I have to check if I can actually offer a configuration or a backup restore thingy before that, or if that will be very problematic due to the current design. I'll have to check that. But I want to look into that, because that certainly makes a ton of sense. Because right now, what you have to do is you first have to go through the whole first setup wizard, and then you can just nuke everything that you just configured, and uh, put your restored backup in there, and that's a bit stupid, admittedly. And I'll look into that. Also, we are now over an hour into our stream, but I'm just continuing this until we are through everything. Don't worry. Right. So the next question by Keith was, could you talk a bit about using OctoPrint in a farm application? I see people have done this, and I'm curious what you think about the current development of that utility, and if you have seen success among any users around the world using OctoPrint in a printer farm environment. So I know that something called OctoFarm is under active development with quite some dedication from the developer, whose nick I think is not expected yet. Seems to gain a lot of traction. Looks beautifully, I have to say. I'm really excited about this. And I also know that back in the day, I don't know if they still use it, but E3D used to have a command line interface client they called Poseidon for managing a print farm at their end. That was backed by OctoPrint, and I was told by, I think it was Josh, who told me that that worked really well as well. And I'm really thrilled that finally this whole farm management stuff is finally seeing some traction again. And because requests for something like that kept popping up left and right, and I was always hoping the community would step up for that, because hands already very full and not enough time to do everything, and something like this on top was simply not something I could commit to, and now it's finally happening, and I'm really happy about that. What I cannot answer you, what I cannot tell you is a lot of success stories or anything like that. The thing is, people usually don't tell me, oh, by the way, I'm running OctoPrint with 20 printers in my farm. I just, the only thing that I see on the stats is there are some instances somewhere on the planet, and thankfully, I have to say, the data is not granular enough for me to pinpoint that they are all in the same building or something like that. For the record, I really would not even want to have that kind of information. I find this creepy. More like they are within a radius of 250 kilometers or something like that. That's all that I get, and that is not even very detailed, because the only thing that I have in terms of location detection is that I get, when OctoPrint pings the tracking server, I get a client IP that it uses to do that. So where the request is originating from. And what I do on the tracking server is I take this IP, pipe it through GeoIP to map it to a rough location on the planet, and then I throw the IP away, because I do not want to have the IP. I do not want to track the IP. I'm not even remotely interested in the IP. But I have this geodata, and this is it depends on ISP information, and it's very, very rough. And I further roughen it down because I only use it as in form of a geohash, and the geohash basically fragments the Earth into grids, into a grid space, and the grid on the level of resolution of the geohash that I'm using is something like, I think I looked it up once, and it was 250 kilometers or something like that. And that suffices. I don't need more than that. I don't want more than that. I don't want your data. I just want to have a rough idea of how many instances are there. Anyhow, long story short, this data is not sufficient for me to figure out how many farms are out there, and so I cannot tell you if this is a common setup, if it's a successful setup, how well it works and all that. The only thing I can tell you is there is some development, and people seem to be happy with said development, and I'm certainly happy about this development. And Johan just said I could group all instances with the same IP address. Yeah, but I don't want that, because for that I would need the IP address, and I want to throw away the IP address. Under the GDPR, the IP address is considered personal identifiable information. And if I want to store that, then I make myself attackable by a bunch of lawyers in Germany, which are just focused on trying to get money from people with horrible methods. And really, I don't need the IP. I don't want the IP. I just throw the bloody IP away. Okay. That's a good idea, localhost. Maybe allow a custom identifier that the user can input in that can input or no? Is my English wrong here? Egal. That would allow grouping on the stat side. That would maybe be an option. The question, of course, is if people actually would bother, but it would be worth a try and would not be that tricky to do. So I'll just think about that. Just a group ID, something like this. Yep. So that was the farm question. Question from the live chat. Can you please explain a little? Ollie asks, can you please explain a little bit deeper why it takes so much effort to support resin printers? I thought they also use G-code. Yes, they do use G-code. Most of them don't even have a serial interface, however. If they do, it's undocumented. The one that I have, the Anycubic Photon, apparently has some undocumented web interface, or rather API, that you can access if you open up the case and then attach an Ethernet port extension thingy into something on the board. And yeah, it's simply not meant to be used. And additionally, OctoPrint currently does not support printers without temperature control, stuff like that. So all that stuff would need to be rewritten first to make sense for a resin printer. And you also have to process images for a resin printer. And yeah, it's a completely different kind of beast. They might use G-code in order to determine when to move up the z-axis and when to do this detachment move, but this is pretty much all they have in common with a FDM printer. The interfaces are different if they are available at all. The formats are different. Everything is different, so it's just a completely different beast. And that makes it so, yeah, I would say impossible with the current architecture, and still damn tricky with anything new and more modular. I have no idea how to pronounce the nickname, so I'm just going to go with the second nickname. Delacroix asks, have you thought about adding a module for printing a list of objects one after another? No, I haven't. Or rather, I have, but I haven't got the time to even look into that. But I think some people on the forums were mentioning something like that. The problem, of course, is the ejection. Could work with a belt. I think there is a belt plugin somewhere, but very specific setup. And yeah, for everything else, it's just not really, yeah, it's so specific that you would need a custom plugin for that, and probably you would have to write it yourself if there isn't something that matches your specific need already. What else do we have? I hope that was everything that was currently in the backlog. So let's switch over to the next question, and we already had that one. So yeah, that was the one that we skipped to, and now we are back on the track. Dennis asks, would it be possible to have OctoPrint give an output on a spare Raspberry Pi output pin when OctoPrint has fully booted? It's a bit of a guessing game when to start the browser. Users would need to add their own beeper and circuit, or a nice person to publish a plugin. First of all, just leave it running. Really, it doesn't hurt. But if you really need to do that, you can probably already do this with OctoPrint's existing event system and either a plugin or system command handler. So the thing is, OctoPrint has startup and shutdown events, and you can also hook into them to execute arbitrary system commands. That's a feature that has been in OctoPrint ever since the very first version. And it's also documented, just for the record. No, I had it here, sorry. So that's this bit here. You can only do that via the config YAML, which is probably why nobody seems to know about this anymore, because people don't read this documentation and just assume the only stuff available is the stuff available on the web interface. But you can do things like event subscriptions, where you say, yeah, when this event gets fired in the system, then please execute this system command. And this one is disabled, disabled, but this one is enabled. Or you can also do stuff like when one of these events fires, or when you connect to the printer, then issue these G-code commands on the serial to the printer. So this mechanism exists, works. At least last I checked, it worked. Haven't heard anything to the contrary. Haven't used it myself in a while, though, I have to admit that. And what you could do there is OctoPi ships with wiring pi installed, at least since I think version 1.15 or 1.16. And so what you could do is on system boot, add something like this somewhere, which would switch the pin 0 on the Raspberry Pi to output mode, for example in ETC-RC local. And then in the event subscription, do something like that. So hook into the startup event and then toggle that pin to 1. And you probably might want to toggle it back to 0 after 20 seconds or so, which you could do with a sleep and another GPIO call. Or you want to maybe just toggle it down again when it shuts down. So on the shutdown event, that would also be an option, just a second subscription here. Oh, also, there should be a B in here. It's not a subscription, it's a subscription. Sorry, that's a typo. Yeah. Plum, 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 plum. That was this question. I think that was all that I wanted to say to this. So basically, you have to put something like this into your config YAML file. I have to say I have not tested that. That was just something that I fumbled together without being able to quickly test it, because frankly, this morning I was not in the mood to start wiring up stuff to the GPOs of a test Pi just to test that. But I'm sure someone will and might report back, maybe in the comments, I don't know. But something like this should work. The next question by Aiden. I often get a message saying the web page I'm viewing OctoPrint by is using significant memory, which may reduce the responsiveness of my Mac. Should I close the web page when not actively looking at it? I read the thread on the forum about potentially disrupting an ongoing print by opening the web page or reloading it, although I've never had that issue. Feel free to close it. It was meant to be closable. About that issue and about that forum thread, and also about the video that forum thread was about, I have never had that issue either, and I frankly would have loved to get approached about this first instead in form of a bug report instead of a rather flashy video. In general, OctoPrint does some heavy caching of the generated HTML pages, and also on the API endpoints that get requested. Can you request endpoints? Well, that get requests during the loading of the page. So, for example, the file list or the serial port list or time-lapse list, stuff like that. Yeah, so it does heavy caching on that, and quite aggressive caching headers as well, so that the browser will also cache a ton of stuff, so that it won't even ask the server very much. It will only do an what was that? I think a GET request will still be fired, but it will contain an e-tag and an if modified since header, and then OctoPrint will evaluate that and say, hey, nothing changed, it's all right, we are not going to calculate that stuff again. So a ton of things were done in OctoPrint's backend in order to ensure that you can safely load the page while stuff is printing. Normally, if you have some third-party plugins installed, for example, that do not do any caching at all and do heavy calculations, heavy lifting during page initialization, then, well, yeah, stuff might stutter. I cannot comment on that. I don't have that under control. In principle, yes, of course, due to the architecture of OctoPrint, it cannot concurrently serve a page and serve a print job. But usually that will never be a problem. If it is, please get in touch with me and we'll look into that. But as I said, usually it should not happen. Coming back to your question, I have also never seen that particular message about using significant memory. And if this is still reproducible in safe mode, so with all third-party plugins disabled and it still happens, then please open a bug report, because I would really like to dig into this and solve it. It should not happen. So yeah, that would be my request in that regard. So let me quickly go over the live chat again. Brian says wait. Okay, let's start chronologically. Localhost says the OctoPrint Repetir Informer plugin by them is which requires a paid app, though, will send a notice when the printer connects. Brian says the OctoPrint Enclosure plugin will already allow you to set GPIO pins on server start. So perfect. It's already done. There is a plugin. Just use that. And 3D Gassner says, Prusa printers have some special serial codes, but these start with a semicolon. How hard would it be to get those into the mainstream? At this moment, I modify it myself. Semicolon is a comment in G-code. If they are using those on the serial console, they are doing something wrong, because they actually should not ever be transmitted to the printer via a serial interface to reduce noise, and OctoPrint strips them. And I do not see them get into mainstream due to that. So they really need to use something else there instead of a semicolon. And Christopher, the message I think was related to client memory. So it was a browser that complained about significant memory usage. I could imagine that happen with a really large G-code file being viewed in the viewer, which is also why the viewer tells you if you're trying to load something, I think, larger than 200 megabytes or something like that on a desktop, do you really think this is a good idea? But I'm not really sure. Okay, let's switch to the next question. There it is. I forgot to refresh. Which is by Adam. It was, how can I manage multiple printers via one Raspberry Pi 3B? What is the max count with the touchscreen support viewing status of multiple printers per Raspberry Pi? So my official stance is you just don't. You use one instance of OctoPrint per printer and one Pi per instance. This is how it was designed to be used. This is the only thing that is supported how it is used. That being said, you will probably be fine. Probably, and this is not an official endorsement, as long as you stay below the number of cores on your Pi. So for Pi 3B, you have 4 cores. So if you run not more than 4 instances of OctoPrint on that thing, you should, in theory, be fine. Your mileage may vary. This is not an official endorsement to run more than 1 instance of OctoPrint per Pi. I can and will not support such setups. My resources are stretched thin as is, so you're on your own if you want to do that. Sorry, I have to say that, because otherwise people will tell me, but you said in the video that it works. I have not said that it works. I have not said that it will work. I'm just saying, in theory, you will probably be fine. Regarding touchscreens, I have to say I have absolutely no idea. Most of the solutions that I know of, TouchUI, Octodash, Octoscreen, and all that, they all are connecting to one instance. In case of TouchUI, they are one instance of OctoPrint. Maybe something like OctoFarm could work on a touchscreen. I honestly do not know. But again, since the official stance is anyhow 1 instance per Pi per printer, I don't have too much to add there. Okay. And the next question by Adam. What is your favorite way to slice in STL? What software and via cloud or OctoPrint via cloud on OctoPrint? So up until recently, I primarily used Prusa Slicer. And then I had to debug this issue that I mentioned earlier with the CRLF line endings, because the only reproductions, so the people who were encountering this problem, they were running Cura. So I figured, okay, I'll install Cura and I'll try if I can reproduce that. I could not reproduce it, but I noticed that that Cura has come really, really far, and that the integration that Aldo, aka Field of View, did with OctoPrint is absolutely stellar. And so, considering that I was really happy with the print results as well, I think I've now switched to Cura, back to where I came from, so to speak. I just use the regular desktop-based Cura. I don't use any kind of cloud stuff, or I never really used the OctoPrint integration myself, also, to be honest. That was more a case of, back then I was still working for BQ, working full-time on OctoPrint for BQ, and they wanted a slicer integration, and so I built the slicer integration, but in hindsight, it really was not the best of ideas, which is also why I'm really glad that I now unbundled that thing again. And if anyone wants to do that, the option is there. You can just write a slicer plugin to try to connect your favorite kind of slicer onto it, but the desktop versions are just always steps ahead, and the UI is just always better, and the UX is always better, and I'd rather see a better integration of the desktop slicer with OctoPrint instead of trying to force the desktop slicer into OctoPrint, so to speak. And that is just the way things are. The thing ways are. Yeah. Ooh. I just like the level of control that a desktop slicer gives me, so I'm sticking to that. Okay. Next question from the live chat, or rather, let's take a look at the live chat. What kind of questions have landed in there? Why is OctoScreen not in the plugin manager? It was already answered in the live chat, but just to repeat it here. It's not a plugin. So the plugin manager contains plugins. OctoScreen is not a plugin. TouchUI is a plugin with a native component as well, which you have to install manually. All OctoPrint's plugin manager can do is install OctoPrint plugins, and I will never change that, because the last thing that I want is starting to mess with people's underlying base installations, which you need to do in order to install something like OctoScreen or Octodash or the TouchUI Bootstrap tool thingy, because that just opens a whole can of worms that I really not want to get opened. It's some kind of responsibilities that I really do not want to have, and all that. So no, we are not going there. The only thing that a plugin manager does is manage plugins. If it's not a plugin, it will not be in there. And that being said, if you are wondering if some kind of actual OctoPrint plugin, why that is not in the repository, probably because the author did not register it in there, because I'm not going around the internet and I'm trying to find plugins that might be interesting for the repository, but it's up for the author, if they write a plugin, to register it with the repository. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't scale. Same kind of question. Is it fine to use OctoPrint and CNCJS at the same time? You mean on the same Pi, or what? I have to admit, I have no idea about CNCJS's requirements, about its memory usage, its CPU usage. How does it take up multiple CPUs and all that? I have no idea about that. I feel not qualified to answer that question. Try it. But yeah, in general, my approach is, if you want your printer to run reliably with a Pi that runs OctoPrint to talk to your printer, then put on the Pi an OctoPi image. Keep your hands off of that OctoPi image. Do not install an OpenVPN server on it, or a Pi-hole on it, or some kind of home automation system on it, and least of all, Home Assistant. I love Home Assistant to bits, but that thing eats resources like mad. You really do not want to have that on the same Pi as that's trying to pump pump G-code as fast as possible to your printer. No ERM systems, no Git servers, no nothing. Just leave it as is. Things are optimized for all resources for OctoPrint, and if you install additional software on that, and that also holds, by the way, for something like an X server with a desktop environment on it, then you might be messing with things that are then no longer available in order to drive your print job. And that's a bad idea. And Martin just says a dedicated system. Yes, you want a dedicated system. For OctoPrint, you do not want to have OctoPrint play sharing of resources with whatever else is running on there with the Raspberry Pis with 4 cores. So anything 2 and up, I think. It's less of an issue than, for example, with the old Raspberry Pi 1, or God forbid that you might be using that, a Raspberry Pi 0. And I'm probably going to get bad looks now for saying that, but no, OctoPrint is still not supported officially on a Raspberry Pi 0W. Yes, you can install it on there. Yes, OctoPi will also run on there. No, I do not recommend it. That thing simply is too low powered. The way the Wi-Fi interface is attached is in a way that it eats CPU cycles for breakfast. And if you watch at a 720p webcam feed while printing, the print will stutter. And that is not the fault of OctoPrint. That is simply because the CPU will be so busy keeping the Wi-Fi driver happy, which is feeding data through the Wi-Fi interface to your browser, that everything else just dies a horrible death. And this is the reason why I say do not use a Pi 0W. Then usually someone chimes up and says, "Oh, but I do, and it works great, and you really should be recommending it as well." Honestly, if it works for you, be happy. But I'm going to recommend what I know will work in all cases and which will not cause me a ton of support overhead. So yeah, I'm going to stick with it. Don't use a Raspberry Pi 0W. And since I just saw the question, my screen just went off. I hope I'm still there. ADV i3++ asks, you still recommend Pi 3B Plus instead of 4? Yes, actually yes. I still think that the Pi 4 is way oversized for something like OctoPrint with its 2 HDMI ports, and it gets incredibly hot. And I mean, its power management appears to be better, but then I also read some issues about the Wi-Fi interface versus the HDMI port, and frankly, for me, the 3B and the 3B Plus are just the best. The best value for the money, basically. You get a system that is completely capable of running that stuff that you want to run on it without a lot of money wasted, without a lot of power wasted, with a focus actually on a server system and not like the Pi 4 is basically made for desktop environment. OctoPrint is a server application. You do not need something with 2 HDMI outputs. It's waste. It's just waste. So yeah, my recommendation is still get a B plus if you can get it. 3B plus, sorry, get a 3B plus if you can get it. Of course, when if and when they stop selling the 4, the 3 and the 4 will be the only thing available, sure, use it. I mean, it's not like it's not working, and it's not like stuff is exploding or anything. It's just running way too hot, even in idle, in my opinion. But you can combat that with a passive or an active cooler. And yeah, it's just use a 3B if you can. Otherwise, use a 4. Never use a 0. That would be my recommendation. Okay. So anything new in the live chat? Do you have any recommendations for OctoPrint and Ender 3? My instance errors out all the time with connection timeouts or device returns readiness to read. Yep, that does sound like there's a long FAQ entry. I would suggest to work through that, and if that doesn't help, maybe try it in an Ender 3 specific forum, but that sounds like for some reason the interface is just constantly being pulled out from under OctoPrint, and this is something that OctoPrint cannot do anything about, or I cannot do anything about. It's just an unstable connection for some reason, and that needs to be solved. And usually the problems are insufficient power on either the Pi or the printer, a faulty USB cable run next to motor wires, EMI emitting stuff somewhere close by. For example, just this week we had a case on the OctoPrint community forum where this kind of error was caused by the sewing machine of the user's spouse. Every time she put the pedal to the metal, so to speak, the connection went poof. So you need EMI shielding, you need a farad bead on the USB cable, stuff like that. And yeah, also try to keep any kind of spouses, children, or pets to pull the plug at the wrong moment. John says, BeagleBone is also a seriously low power system. Do not recommend printing anything else than through the print from SD feature. Yep. I honestly am not even sure if you can still buy the good old BeagleBone Black. I still have one, but I'm not entirely sure where. But yeah. Then the question is, what about Orange Pi and other micro PCs? Yeah, I mean, OctoPrint runs on them probably, but neither Guy nor me have the time to maintain several versions of the OctoPi image. The most common used hardware platform is the Raspberry Pi. If someone else wants to maintain an OctoPi image for an Orange Pi or something like that, sure, do it. Get in touch with me, get in touch with Guy, and I'm sure we'll work something out to keep that synced and all that. But in general, just understand that this project is being maintained. So OctoPrint is primarily more or less exclusively maintained by me, and is the OctoPi image is maintained almost exclusively by Guy Scheffer, and he has a full-time job next to everything as well. And while OctoPrint is my full-time job, I already have my hands completely full with everything, even without additional hardware platforms that I might be targeting. So yeah, I'm thinking about stuff like maybe having an approach similar to Home Assistant is doing with their HAS.io kind of setup, which is basically a Docker container with a supervisor and all that. And I have not really looked into that, and I fear it might be a horrible, horrible, messy experience, considering that I need to somehow try to pull the serial interface into a Docker container without knowing how it's called at first, and so that doesn't sound that much like it's that much fun. And you also have the whole thing with the camera, and also I'm not sure if this is a good approach in that case, but still, this is something that sometimes when I'm standing under the shower, actually, I'm thinking about stuff like this. But yeah. Joe asks, was there something that you were personally really interested in talking about that wasn't already asked? Actually, no. I was just thinking, let's see how what kind of questions will come, and so far everything is all right. Delacroix asks a security question. What do you think about the ways to reduce the fire hazard within OctoPrint, and which is the best? I mean, which fire hazard in OctoPrint? OctoPrint is not a fire hazard. The printers usually, or might be, but in that case, I mean, OctoPrint tells you to never leave your printer unattended. Don't leave your printer unattended. Ideally, what I have here, and I'm actually going to pull it out now, I have this next to my printers. And I don't actually need that, I think, but I still have it in case I do need it. And it's mounted right next to my printers. And I would suggest to do that as well. Just have a fire extinguisher on hand. Never leave that thing really unattended. And yeah, and most importantly of all, if you have a printer that does have thermal runaway protection disabled, Jesus Christ, please flash a firmware that has it enabled. Make sure that thing is electronically sound. If it is some sort of printer that is just like bound to explode into flames one way or another, and we all know which one I'm talking about here, right? Then for the love of all that is holy, please replace all the electronics and basically every single part of that thing that isn't mechanical. And don't buy printers that are fire risks, please. The only way that you can prevent companies from putting out faulty stuff like this is not buying it. Yeah. Vincent makes some suggestions how to do all this via Docker and Kubernetes and all that. So I was more thinking about maybe Docker Compose because more readily available and all that. But as I said, that's shower thought material so far. And yes, John, exactly that company. And now let me quickly scroll through the chat again, or rather scan through the chat again. Yeah, I think. So if you still have a question burning under your nails, now is the time to ask it, because otherwise I will wrap this up. It's now almost at 2 hours. So I'll just start with the wrap up, the usual wrap up, and then I'll take another look at the live chat if there is anything in there, and if so, I'll answer it then. So the next regular installment of this broadcast will be by end of April. And I will also, as usual, post the appointment on Patreon. And as I said, I'm also thinking about making this a regular thing. And now is your chance in the comments and right now also in the live chat to tell me if you might be interested in something like a weekly or so fireside kind of chat, only maybe half an hour or less. I'm not entirely sure how long yet, to just talk about stuff without any kind of script or without any kind of devlog or something like that, but just chat a bit, ask questions, talk stuff through that came up during the week. I don't know. I'm just trying to offer some way here of trying to hold together the 3D printing community now that all of our events are currently being shut down thanks to all this Corona situation. So this is the only idea that I have right now. If this is anything that might interest you, sure, just comment if you would like to see something like that, and then I'll think about it, how best to approach it, and how best to schedule it. And yep. Also now back to the live chat, a quick look. Joe asks, what was your reason for starting with Flask as a microservice instead of a larger framework like Django or Pyramids? I wanted a microservice. I didn't want to install a full-fledged framework that also was tailored towards full CRUD stuff for database management and all that stuff, because I didn't need that. And I still don't need that, by the way. What I needed was just a way to expose some APIs that I then could consume by the JavaScript and the browser component. And so I looked around and Flask looked like a good candidate, and so I used it. Actually, these days, I kind of kick myself for that, because the thing is that Flask is a WSGI application that needs to be run in a WSGI container, which means it is in the way that it is inherently synchronous in nature. So you get the whole request, and then you have to process it, and then you push out the whole response. The thing is, I run Flask inside Tornado in OctoPrint, and Tornado is single-threaded. So the combination of a synchronous request response pattern plus a single-threaded server means as long as a Flask request is being processed, the server cannot serve anything else. That is bad, especially if you have some requests that takes a long time to process, because during that time the WebSocket can also not be serviced, and that causes some issues here and there. If I were to do it again now, and this is also something that I'm actually planning to do sooner rather than later, is I would get rid of Flask in that case and just re-implement the whole API directly in Tornado, because then I can also do stuff like streaming responses and all that, and that will open up some very exciting possibilities that with WSGI I right now don't have. The problem, of course, here is that currently anything that plugins can do relies on Flask, so I would lose backwards compatibility if I would drop Flask completely. So my idea is more like migrate my own APIs, offer up that stuff, and then let's see how things are going. And maybe long term try to get rid of it. But yeah, so this is the current stuff that is going around in my head. Also some part of the shower thoughts that I mentioned. John asks, what's your computer setup like? Fancy ergonomic keyboard or just regular IBM-like straight layout? How are your wrists coping? Oh, now I'm going to do my little dive into the rabbit hole of mechanical keyboards, I fear. So I used to have one of these fancy, spacey Microsoft Ergonomical Natural 3000, I think it was called, keyboards. So with the inverse tilt and the split design and also the angle for your wrists, because I had some really big issues with my wrists. And I typed on that for ages, and then I switched to a Microsoft Sculpt ergonomic keyboard, which is was basic for yeah, which was basically the same thing, but with the laptop keys and flat and a very short key travel, and that was even better for my wrists. And then I went down the rabbit hole of mechanical keyboards, and now I have a 10 keyless Ducky 1 RBG. And originally I wanted to design my own keyboard, again with an inverse tilt, an ISO DE layout, and a short key travel, so ideally with something like the Kale Chalk key switches, which are mechanical but with a very short travel and suited for keyboards, for laptop keyboards. But I couldn't source them, and then I couldn't source keycaps for them with ISO-DE layout or even just ISO layout. And so then I went the route with Gatoron Reds and just very thick silencers, so O-rings on them. And that's also something that I have on my Ducky. So that it runs on Cherry MX Reds with thick O-rings, so the travel is shorter, which is good for my wrist. But it's straight, and I have this thing in front, which is just a palm rest. And let me check if I can quickly disconnect it. So this is my daily driver, and it also lights up, just not now without connection. And I really like this form factor, the 10 keyless approach. This is also an ISO-DE layout with this big enter key. And yeah, I know I could get used to a new layout. I could get used to a NANSI US layout easily, probably, but still it would mean a lack in productivity for a while. And the thing is, I have 2 extra weird German characters in umlauts in my last name, and I really enjoy that I'm able to type them without having to resort to stuff like copy paste or very weird number combinations on a numpad. So I'm sticking with the ISO-DE layout, and yeah, I'm just gotten used to it. Even if it's not really suited for development, actually, because all this stuff that you constantly have to use during development, so dollar signs or a backspace or tilde or upticks, backticks, this stuff like that, single quotes, that all requires me to do stuff like this, and is not just a quick keep touch away from achievement like it is for anyone typing in US layout. But well, yeah, and the rest of the computer setup is like I have a Rocket Cone XTD as my mouse, and right next to that there is a standalone numpad. Mm, a big giant gaming XXL mouse pad to be like a cushion layer for everything. And on my left side, I actually have a Kensington trackball. This is the ball from the trackball. Because if my right wrist starts acting up, I can still lose the left hand with the trackball in order to do everything. Yeah. And I also now have this funny thing, thanks to my boyfriend. Which I'm still learning the ropes of in Fusion 360 and all that. But it's fun. It's really nice to be able to use something like that to navigate during 3D design. If I find the time to actually do that, but yeah. Okay. John asks, how's the scooter project going? I'm not sure if Christopher is still in the chat. But yeah, we were planning on working some more on that for 37C3, but so far we haven't yet, or at least I haven't yet. Maybe he has found the time to look that much more into it, because yeah, life happened and all that. But the scooter is actually standing behind me, but I need a new scooter because that thing turned out to be not as stable and yeah, well made as I hoped it would be. What else do we have? Yeah, so now we are currently talking about RSI situations in the live chat. Yeah, I thankfully can report that I haven't had an issue with that for at least a year now. So whatever I've changed in my life apparently was for the better. And Christopher says plans on the scooter thing are progressing. We really have to synchronize about this stuff again. No, Jim, that was not the only thing. Yeah. So I think if there are no more questions, Aldo asks if I will ever eat cake again. So for those of you who are wondering about this kind of question, it was my birthday last Saturday, and I got this ridiculous cake with an OctoPrint logo on top. And so it turned out it was as massive as it looked. Because one piece of that cake and you were stuffed for the rest of the day. And yeah, it's now almost a week later, and there's still cake because we've been working through this cake for the whole week. And yeah, I still like cake. I just have to be careful not to eat too much of this particular cake. I ate a piece for breakfast, and I'm still not really hungry, even though it's already 7 p.m. now. Yeah. It's, yeah. Look on Twitter. I posted pictures of the cake. It had a rainbow inside. It was really, really great. And it tastes great. It's just, like pure sugar and butter cream. And I don't know. It's ridiculous. It's the most ridiculous cake that I've ever gotten, I have to say. But I'm currently working on a new bread. So I'm going to bake bread tomorrow because, yeah, that way I also don't have to go to the bakery. And I'm really, really glad that I stocked up on yeast because yeah, that's also one of the things that you cannot buy at stores anymore in Germany, or at least you couldn't last week. I haven't checked this week yet. Okay, I think that was that then. and I'm going to really wrap this up for now then. Thanks for being here. I think it was the most active live chat I've ever seen, and it was kind of tricky to keep up with it from time to time. And it's also the highest view count I think one of these has ever had. So yeah, that was really fun, and I hope it was interesting for you as well. Until next time, whether that may be the regular one or maybe one of the fireside chat thingies that I'm still thinking about doing. So post your opinion down there, what you would expect from something like this, and if you would even attend this or something, and then I'll think about it whether I want to do that next week. And so until then, until we see each other next time, I just want to tell you to wash your hands, cover your face, stay indoors, and stay healthy, most importantly. And yeah, until then, happy printing. Bye.